go ahead and get started. We've got a couple hundred people on the line today, so we want to make sure you guys have plenty of time for questions. Welcome to Secrets to Painless Patching at Scale. This is a best practices webinar walking through how you should think about and what you should be doing with patching. I don't expect we'll blow any minds here today. I think this is a lot of stuff that maybe you will have heard about patching in the past, but it's nice to have it all consolidated in one place and really highlighted for you as you build out your patching strategy. So that's really what we're going to focus on today. It's those best practices that are going to help you secure your environment and spend less time on patching. I'm going to move over here and introduce the NinjaOne team today. My name is Pete Breton. I'm the Senior Director of Customer and Product Marketing at NinjaOne. And I'm joined by our resident patching expert, Chris Williams.
Hey.
Chris, do you want to do a brief intro of your credentials?
Yeah, I will. So thanks, Pete. Yeah, my background. So I started managing patching for an enterprise. I had about 130,000 endpoints. And then I moved to actually managing software for that company that executed the patching. And then from there, I've now moved to Ninja, and I am the product manager here in charge of patching here at NinjaOne. So happy to be here.
Thanks so much, Chris. So if you have any complaints about patching, don't send them to Chris. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
So I brought Chris on because he is our resident patching expert, and he really has a lot of real world experience managing environments with complex patching needs. He's also our product manager, so he knows more about patching in Ninja than just about anyone else. And he's going to provide a lot of color to the best practices we're showing off today. So I am going to jump right in. We've got some slides because this is a best practices webinar. We want to consolidate this information and make it as easy for you to consume as possible. So we're going to run through some slides about the patching process and best practices around securing your environments and minimizing the time you spend on patching. Then Chris is going to actually walk us through Ninja and show you some of the key highlights of patching in Ninja and how to use the product to, again, secure your environment and automate as much of patching as possible. So let's go ahead and jump in. Two things before we actually start, three things, I guess. One, we are giving away an Ember mug at the end. We will do that before Q&A. So stick around. We'll announce that winner right on the last slide. Number two is this is interactive, or it should be. So we do have a Q&A section in the webinar platform. If you go up and type in your questions there, we can see them. Your peers can vote on them, and we can answer at the end when we have time your most pressing and most popular questions. I also do encourage you to interact it in chat. A lot of our partners are doing patching really, really well and have their own insights and best practices that they can share with you. So we encourage you to engage with each other as well as with us. All right, let's hop in. So let's scare you guys a little bit. So here are some interesting stats on patch management. All of these are meant to just highlight to you the problem that exists today. There's another webinar that I've done that we talk about how the fundamentals of endpoint security really just are not being met. And I think this reinforces that. Almost 60% of breaches in the market could have been avoided through patching. Adding to that, and this one's really scary, is that over a third of breach victims knew that they were vulnerable before being breached. They knew they had unpatched endpoints and that those could be exploited, and they had not taken action to actually patch those endpoints and secure their environments. A lot of companies are saying that that's because they just can't patch fast enough. They don't have the staff, they don't have the tools, they don't have the processes in place to get patches onto their endpoints to secure them fast enough to avoid being exploited. And that number in the bottom left, 102 days average to deploy a patch, kind of reinforces that. It takes a quarter on average to get an endpoint secured once a patch is released. Now, a big addition to this that's more recent and timely is that another 57% of companies say that remote patching is more complex. So patching for field and remote employees and distributed offices makes it much more difficult. These stats taken together should, one, terrify all of us collectively, but two, point out that there is opportunity for improvement here. If companies know that they are vulnerable, if they know that they don't have the bandwidth to make patching possible. If they know that they're not getting those patches out quick enough, they at least know the problems exist and then can go out and solve them. And so, we want to talk about how you can solve these problems um, quickly and easily, and with Ninja, because surprise, we think we can help you a lot here. So I do want to jump into that last second to last stat really quick about how long it takes you to actually patch an endpoint. This is shoot, I actually forget the source of this. I have it in my notes, but this is a graph that shows the average number of days between disclosure and exploit. So if it takes about a quarter on average, so 100 days to deploy a patch to get an endpoint fully patched, you are not in any way protecting yourself from threat actors, because on average it's taking between 3 and 5 days. So about 5.5 days in 2017, and about 3 days in 2022 between when an exploit is disclosed. A threat is disclosed to when it's exploited. That means you need to get these patches out, these critical security patches out within days of them being released if you expect to actually protect your systems. 102 days just isn't going to cover it. And even dramatically improving that still leaves you vulnerable for a period of time. And that's where that 35% stat comes in, where people know that they're vulnerable. They just don't have the bandwidth to get all of their endpoints patched and secure quickly. And so whatever process you have in place, it needs to be automated and it needs to be fast, or else you're very, very likely to have an exploit in the wild that could impact you. All right, let's talk a little bit about the patching lifecycle. The majority of this webinar, we're going to focus on policy creation. But there are a million different ways you could set up your patching lifecycle that you could visualize it. This is one I happen to like. And one of the reasons I happen to like it is because if you deal with the device segmentation and policy creation, a tool like Ninja is going to handle the rest of this for you. So if we start at the top, that's around discovery. You need to know what devices you have in order to manage them. You can't manage what you can't see. And so you need a tool that's going to give you full visibility into your managed endpoints. And whether that be, you manually going out and finding all of your machines and bringing them into your tool, or if your tool has a built-in discovery function to help you identify unmanaged devices and bring them in, you need to know every device on your network, every device that you manage in order to secure it. So that's step one, discovery. Step two is device segmentation. And we're not going to cover that a lot today, but this could be something as simple as breaking out your servers from your workstations and laptops, right? So servers and end user devices. Or it could be something much more complex where you have devices segmented by location and time and use case and whatever it may be. Having your devices segmented intelligently is going to help you dramatically improve the outcomes of your patching process while reducing impact on end users. Policy creation is where we're going to spend a lot of time today. That's about building out your patching policy. How are you patching, and what are your SLAs, and how are your devices being managed at scale? So then we jump into the automated part of what Ninja does, and that's patch identification, testing, deployment, and reporting and validation. Those things together, your patching tool is going to handle for you very easily. In Ninja, we identify all of your patches on a schedule. We will help you deploy them to those device segments that you want to use for testing. We will deploy them automatically, and then all of that data about the status of your devices will be easily reportable and viewable in Ninja. That being said, if you're not using Ninja, all of these steps are really important to get right as well. So identifying all of your vulnerabilities, bringing those patches into your environment, testing them on non-critical machines for a period of time to make sure they're not going to impact stability and reliability, actually deploying them out to all of your machines at scale so that they are secure. And then finally, because you can't trust anything, you need to report and validate, right? So even with Ninja, if you're going through this process or any other patching tool, you still need to validate and report and make sure that all of your devices are secure. Something we hear quite often is, when people move over to Ninja, they say, we had this patching process in place and our tool was telling us we were secure and fully patched. And we bring someone over and there are unpatched devices. There are devices missing patches, you need to validate, again, even if you're a Ninja customer, go out and validate that your patches are being installed and your devices are secure. So this is I'm just here because my boss won't fire me. Sorry, I got distracted by chat there. This is the way to think about your patching policy and your patching lifecycle, and we're going to spend the rest of the webinar really talking about that policy creation bit. So I'm going to jump in now to the first bit here, and this is the non-patching stuff that's going to impact patching. So, if you look at patching, people really look at that as, identifying your patches and deploying them, right? That's kind of how they think about patching. But there's all this other stuff that you can and should be doing that's going to impact how well you patch, how impactful your patching process is. And so the first one here, and that goes to the discovery lifecycle bit at the top, is making sure that you have visibility into all of your assets and applications. So knowing what you manage is going to be step one. If you have devices in your environment that you're unaware of, you can't effectively report on the outcomes of your patching process. You can't even patch them because you don't know where they are and what they are. So having an inventory that's always up to date, it's has complete information about your assets. That's number one. Number two, if possible, is standardizing your OS builds. And patching will help you get there. But even if you're using image-based deployment or anything like that, standardizing what those builds look like is going to help you patch more effectively, because you're starting from the same place. You're starting from a common ground, right? Number three here is ensuring regular backups. So we all know Microsoft is notorious, if you will, for deploying bad patches. And so having backups in place in case everything goes wrong is a really important part of your patching process. If you have a tool like Ninja, fortunately, you can tie those two things together and back up on a schedule that relates to your patching schedule. But if not, you need to make sure you're working with your backup team to ensure that you have regular backups whenever you're going to be deploying patches. Number four here, this one's really important, and I'm just going to touch on it briefly, but having a patching plan or SLA in place with your business partners is super important. So there will always be situations where a business owner or someone in an organization or an application owner asks for an exception to your patching policy, and you need to have a plan and an SLA in place for how you can work with those exceptions. So if, for example, you have a customer that requires you to only patch on a certain day of the week, that's something you have to plan for. You have to build a process to manage outside of your normal schedule. Or if you have someone internally who has a particular line of business application and you're only allowed to patch it once a month, that's a firm requirement. You need to be able to work around that and figure out what you're willing to accept from a vulnerability perspective, and how you can work with that partner to minimize the likelihood of attack. Last but not least, the monitoring vendor and industry security announcements is really important. There are a lot of resources out there today for you to go and subscribe to notifications from Microsoft or from patching specific websites that will tell you when there are critical 0 days that you need to patch, or when someone's releasing a bad patch, or something that might impact your line of business applications. Subscribe to those websites, identify those vendors that'll help you with that. That way you have more information earlier and can adjust your process accordingly. So these are the non-patching best practices that impact patching, but they are really important to get right to make sure all of your patching process goes well. All right, so let's talk about patch scanning. All the data that I'm going to show you today is from our customers and how they are actually patching. So on the left here, we have our patch scanning schedule and the data from our customers on how they are patching. So you can see across the top, the day of the week people are scanning. So Sunday through Saturday, and then people who are scanning every day. And then below that, you have the time of day that they're scanning. This is just to share with you what our customers are actually doing, so you can see how your peers are patching and use that information to adjust your own potentially. So what you see here are spikes on Friday and uh, a little bit on Wednesday as well. But quite commonly, you'll see people scanning every Friday. But the daily at the end, 25% are scanning every day. In addition, you're actually seeing a lot of people patching from 5 onward, although some people have adjusted it so it's early in the morning or during the workday. Now, these don't necessarily align with our recommendations here. So if we go to the next one here, patch scanning is actually incredibly it's not very impactful from a device performance perspective. And in fact, Microsoft will limit the amount of resources your endpoints are able to use for patch scanning. And so you can actually scan throughout the day and on any day without really impacting end user uh, end user experience. So the recommendation here is to scan more frequently. So in Ninja, we're a little bit unique in the industry in that we separate our scan and update schedule so that you can get information about missing vulnerabilities or outstanding vulnerabilities into the Ninja platform. So if you scan daily, you're going to have more information to act on more quickly without really impacting the end user experience. So the recommendation here is, if possible, switch to a daily scanning schedule and do so when you think the devices will be online. So let's say your employees work generally 9 to 5. Scanning during that window can actually help ensure that you have more complete data for more devices more often. Now, we can't always ensure that all devices are going to be online. So there are options to make up missed scans if to make up scans if they're missed. We definitely recommend that you use that feature. And then last but not least here is getting vulnerability data, making sure that you have data that tells you how important a missing patch is so that you can act quickly. So if it's a 9 or a 10, for example, even if you're deploying monthly, you need that vulnerability data, because if it says 9 or 10 from a vulnerability score perspective, you actually may want to deploy that ad hoc outside of your standard schedule. So these are our recommendations around scanning. You can actually see that our customer data doesn't really align with these recommendations. And so, we want to make these recommendations so that you can shift them to be more impactful. So move to daily scanning if you can. And make sure that you are making up missed scans and scanning when devices are online so you have that better data. All right. Number 2 here is patch updating. So as I said, we separate our patch scans from our patch updates. Update is the update part of Ninja patching. You will scan for patches again, and then you will deploy patches. So it combines both. Now, again, we have our customer data on the left here. About 20% of our customers are doing this daily, which was actually a really big surprise, I think, for Chris when he saw that. About 70% are patching weekly, and 13% monthly or longer. So this actually does align pretty well with our recommendations, and I think was a little bit surprising for everyone when we pulled that data. For those who are doing patching once a week, you're seeing a preponderance on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I don't think there's any surprise there, but a surprising number throughout the week. And then finally, here, this does again align, but mostly doing your patch updating outside of business hours, which makes perfect sense because you don't want to negatively impact the end user experience. So what are our recommendations here? One is going back to that life cycle, making sure you're setting up patching groups. So different groups of devices that you can roll out patches to at different times, but also with different profiles. So you want different devices patched different ways. Make sure your devices are set up, your organizations and policies are set up in such a way that you have different groups of devices that are patched differently. The second is push to deploy weekly if possible. This is going to really minimize your likelihood of being breached. You're going to have a much faster time to patch than other people, which is going to make you less vulnerable. And I mean, we even see about 20% of people here deploying patches daily once they've gotten up to a standardized deployment schedule. Third here is plan for or wake or retry offline devices. So especially if you're going those longer cycles without patching, so monthly or weekly, if a device does miss a patching window, there are options to wake the device for patching, to retry those patches if missed, Or, worst comes to worst, you can do something like deploying a script to ensure that the power settings don't cause the device to go offline once people are to sleep. Sorry, once uh, people stop using their device for the day. So have plans in place to ensure your devices are online and ready for that patching window. That way you can ensure a higher first touch patch compliance rate. Last but not least here, this one's really important. It goes back to the last item on the previous slide is plan for 0 days and critical patches. Again, Ninja's going to provide you that vulnerability data, which will tell you, the 8s and 9s and 10s that come in. You need to have a plan for deploying those outside of your standard patching schedule. So if you're patching monthly in particular, and a high vulnerability score patch comes in, you need to take that and do an ad hoc deployment outside of your standard schedule, because that means your devices are incredibly vulnerable. So have a plan in place, maybe your own internal SLA for what to do when a high vulnerability patch comes in, so that you can get it into your environment as quickly as possible. The good thing is you can do ad hoc deployments very easily in Ninja, which will make this a much easier process. All right. I see a lot of stuff going on in chat, so hopefully I'm not saying anything too controversial here. All right, let's jump into reboots. In Ninja, we have a lot of control over what you do from a reboot perspective. So we give you separate reboot management for attended and unattended devices, so whether or not someone's logged in. For users that are logged in, we give you the option to prompt, notify, force, or do nothing. So prompt means you're going to give them a custom message that says, hey, this device needs to be rebooted. Do you want to reboot now? Yes or no, right? And they can always delay it for a certain number of times, or a certain number of tries, or a certain amount of time. That's the most popular option that our customers use. We do have the option to just notify and force the reboot. That's far less popular, and then forcing and not telling them, that's pretty unpopular as well. Those that are doing nothing here, that 20%, what we've actually found is that the vast majority of them are actually doing rebooting outside of our patching process. So they are still rebooting, they're just not using our built-in reboot capability in patching to do it. For those that are for unattended devices, we do offer the option to reboot on a schedule. We are seeing a great deal of preference for Saturday and Sunday, and for outside of business hours there, particularly in the late afternoon. So our recommendations here: reboot management. Devices that have not been rebooted are the number one reason patches fail in Ninja. Because of that, you need to be managing your reboots. And you can't really rely on your end users. So you need to automate this. Now, it's really, really important that you balance the end user experience with your reboots, or else you're going to have people throwing a fit. But you do need to err on the side of making sure reboots happen, or you're going to get to a point where where patches are going to start failing because they cannot install until a reboot has happened. So using the built-in reboot features in Ninja will help you get those devices rebooted on a schedule to minimize the impact to the end user, while still making sure that reboots happen. In addition, on top of our patching capability, you can detect how long devices have been online. And as a fail-safe, say every 30 days, if a device hasn't been rebooted, reboot it through something like conditions. So there's another recommendation there as well. All right. So let's talk about patching profiles. So this will, for anyone who's not a Ninja customer, this will make a little bit more sense once Chris actually shows it off in the platform. But Ninja gives you the ability to automate approvals as part of the patching policy. So for each of these patch categories, this is the Windows view. There's a different one for Linux and Mac, but this is the Windows view. You have the ability to automatically approve, reject, or manually approve all of your patches by security update criticality and approval category, and for advanced approval. So approve means that after a scan, that patch is going to automatically be approved and go into the pending bucket, at which point when an update occurs, it will be installed. Reject means that once this patch is identified, it will go into the rejected bucket and it will never be installed. You can revert that, but at least automatically, it won't ever be installed. Manual, the patch will go into pending and it'll sit there forever until you review it and approve or reject it. So those are the options. So if you have approve or reject, you're essentially going to have zero touch patching. If you're using manual, you will have some patches you have to go in, review, and approve, and then they get rolled out according to the schedule. So we have 4 profiles we're going to talk about here. These are the most common profiles that our customers use. Number 1 here is fully automated. I think, again, Chris was a little bit surprised when I told him this is one of our most popular. You are essentially here approving all patches and saying any patch that comes in that we identify, you are going to install automatically. The good thing about this is there is a ton of efficiency in terms of day-to-day management of patching. The bad news is, particularly for the advanced approvals, these could be pretty impactful on end user experience and could be pretty impactful on your timeline if something goes wrong. So if you're approving everything, yes, you're going to save some time up front, but there is this is where you potentially have some failures that really impact end users. And so a feature update would be like updating to Windows 11. Yeah, James, thank you for that. Moving on to the next profile here, we have the mostly automated. I think this is actually our most common profile, if I remember right. What we're seeing here is that fully automated option, but the advanced approvals are set to manual. Again, that's because those driver and feature updates, those are the ones that are most likely going to cause you a headache and your end user a headache. So we're optimizing here for, let's get everything as patched as possible. Let's make sure we don't have any security issues. But for driver and feature updates, we're going to hold those back. Maybe we'll test them. Maybe we won't even roll them out. We're just going to see them, bring them into the platform, and then most likely roll them out at a much more conservative schedule with more testing and more visibility. So this is a really, really common patching profile that we see as well. Next, we have what I'm calling a balanced profile. Here, we're still erring on the side of getting those really important patches into devices as quickly as possible, but bringing a few more things as manual so that we're reducing the amount of risk that we have. So those low and moderate security updates, the optional approvals, and the advanced approvals are all being set to manual. You're still going to get the visibility. You're still going to see them in Ninja, and you're still going to be able to take action. But those are set to manual, so they're not being deployed rapidly, while all of the kind of more critical patches are being approved. Last but not least, we have the manual process. This is basically setting everything to manual. The optional approvals to reject, although that could be manual as well. This is most common. We're seeing this on servers. So you still want to use Ninja for your server patching, but you don't want to automate it. You don't want the potential risk there. So you're setting everything to manual. You're getting all the data in, and you're going through it patch by patch and deploying those manually, or rolling them out, all together. But when you're ready, when no one's using that server or whatever. So it's not super common to see this on end user devices, and nor would I recommend it on end user devices. But it does allow you to have a conservative and really hands-on approach with server patching. All right. I am next going to move on to application patching. This is another really important part of your patching strategy. The recommendation here, Ninja has built-in application patching for Windows and Mac. It's really important that you're keeping your applications up to date. Unlike OS patching, again, this is going to be really, really minimally impactful from an end user perspective. So the recommendation is to roll these patches out daily, scan and deploy daily. Most applications don't require a reboot, so you can be a lot less aggressive with your reboots here. And then just a quick tip here is, again, if you're using Ninja patching, but frankly, if you're using any patching application that patches applications, there's no way to say that without sounding confusing. Turn on patching for all applications, right? So, in Ninja, you can choose which applications you want and turn on patching, but go ahead and select all of them and set them to patch. You don't want to set them to install necessarily, but set them to automatically patch all applications, because that way you don't have to manage it, right? It's just really low touch, really easy to see the outcomes and Ninja's going to manage it for you, or whatever other patching application you're using will manage it for you. Last but not least here, and again, uh, it's important to stress how impactful this can be. You do need to validate and report on your patching outcomes, because you shouldn't trust any application. I work for Ninja. I think you can trust us, but it's your job to protect your environment. And so you need to validate and report on things independently, right? So validate that your patching solution is actually patching. Again, even if you're a Ninja customer, we think it's really reliable and stable and does what it's supposed to, but an extra layer of validation doesn't hurt anyone, right? Report on the outcomes of your patching regularly so that you can understand how your environment is being patched, how secure it is, etc. And then optimize whatever system you're using for actionable reporting. We actually have our dashboard there, our patching dashboard there on the right. Chris Williams is going to show you an earlier version of this in his demo. But you need to make sure that whatever you're using from a reporting perspective is helping you identify patching issues and resolve them. Yes, none of you will have, or very few of you will have seen this dashboard. So Chris will get a chance to show that off for you. All right. So if you're a customer, you don't have to listen anymore. If you're a prospect, if you've never heard of Ninja, this is our unified IT management platform. It gives you truly centralized and unified control over your devices at scale, giving you visibility and control over every endpoint that you manage. In addition to our core remote monitoring and endpoint management capability, which gives you monitoring, alerting, patching, software management, and our automation engine, we also do have add-ons for remote access, endpoint security, backup, ticketing, and documentation, all in a single pane of glass, as well as a pretty powerful API with great integrations to the tools that you use today. And with that, we will hand it off to Chris to show you some of this stuff live.
Yep. Thanks, Pete. So yeah, I'm seeing in the chat the questions about the dashboard. Pete, that is a screenshot of a new dashboard that is coming very soon. I'm going to be able to demo a very early preview version of that dashboard. The one that the screenshot that Pete had is a more feature complete version, but it hasn't been released to the environment that I'm testing on yet, or I'm demoing in. So you won't see the final version, but you will see an early look at the dashboard. But I did want to walk through, I'm going to spend the next few minutes just kind of walking through some of the key points that Pete raised. So to start with, I've logged into my Ninja instance and I'm taken immediately to the overall health dashboard. I'm going to come back to this dashboard here in a minute, but I first wanted to walk through the patch policies in Ninja. So I'm going to go into administration, and under policies, we have a list of policies here. That these ones we have kind of our master or primary policy. That one is up at the top, and this one, it looks like this environment has been configured based on different tiers of support based on this account's clientele. But you can configure multiple inherited policies. You can have, I've seen some questions in the chat about how do we test policies on different environments. What I would suggest is segmenting a group of your devices into what I call like a canary or very, very early test group, to where they get patches almost immediately, like as soon as they're available. And then you have what I call a beta test group. They get patches maybe a week afterwards. And then you have kind of your full environment where a week, 2 weeks after that. It's really up to you and your risk profile, your risk tolerance. As Pete mentioned, the exploits are usually available, it looks like in 2022 within 3 days on average from when a patch is available. So I'm going to go ahead and go into a Windows workstation policy. And before I jump into the patch setup, I did want to highlight a couple of items, starting with conditions. Right away, you can see in this policy, we have conditions set up to monitor a number of data points on my devices. We're alerting on load disk space, CPU usage. Looks like, down here we have CPU temperature. It's set at multiple different thresholds, so we can configure how we're alerted based on that. One thing that I wanted to point out in this policy, I think, yeah, if I scroll to the bottom here, that it's also configured to alert if a device hasn't been patched in the last 30 days. So a lot of you were, I saw some messages in the chat that not all of your devices are being patched. So maybe there's something wrong on that device. Like we've all been there. If you've managed enough devices, you've all been there where you have this one device or these handful of devices that just aren't installing patches for whatever reason. Something's wrong on the device. Maybe it was configured before to use some type of WSUS Windows Server Update service, and now you've moved it to a different environment, and that setup no longer applies. So that there is a condition. This is one that I believe was scripted. Yeah, if I go in here, so this is a scripted condition. I will share that this is something that we're looking to move as a native condition within Ninja, so that you don't have to script this out. This is a feature that is in development now. So that will be coming soon. But it looks like for this account, they just went ahead and scripted it. That is something that you can do. They also set up they configured a condition for when a patch is successfully installed. So maybe it might be useful that this condition, if you have a support team that needs to do some type of post patching work on a device, this is probably more for, I would say, servers, where after servers have been patched and they're back online, you might have technicians needing to verify that everything is back up and running, or you might have some manual tasks that you want to do. One area that I'll highlight next is the scheduled scripts. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but there are a number of tasks that you can schedule on a device, whether you want to run something periodically or whether you want to run it just once. And for example, I can schedule here I got, well, it looks like multiple Windows cleanup scripts. So I can schedule a script to do standard Windows cleanup at a regular interval. I can turn off the computer at a specified time. I can, in this case, I can configure a script to basically automate all of the workstation setup that I do. So when the when the Ninja agent is installed on the device, we're going to go through and we're going to install multiple applications. We're going to enable BitLocker. We're going to add a local user, disable USB drive, like that. You can automate how you set up and configure your computer and really take the manual tasks out of your workflow on that. But I want to spend most of my time just talking through patches and spending the bulk of my time here on the patch configuration screen. So right away, I can see for scanning, I can see that this configuration is already following the best practices that Pete mentioned earlier. We are scanning daily. It's scheduled to happen at a time when we expect the device will likely be online. It looks like this one's scheduled around lunchtime for our users. It's also set to run a scan immediately if missed, and to wake up the device if it's asleep. This one, if you're doing a scan daily, I don't know that you need to wake up the device if it's been asleep. But I do actually recommend run the scan immediately if missed, having that checked, because if a device has been offline for, let's say it's been offline for a week, a couple weeks, user was on vacation and they come back, you want to know immediately if they have updates available. You don't want to wait until the next patch cycle. It's, again, back to what Pete said, that 3-day window that we're in right now. You For critical updates, you want to make sure that those get applied. And if you're not scanning, you might not know, like if you're only scanning weekly or less often, you might not know that a device is vulnerable to a new 0-day that's come out since the device was offline. For the update schedule, this one, it already aligns with a lot of what Pete was saying. We're doing weekly on Friday at 5:30 in the evening. This is one where I would also recommend running immediately if missed, but every environment's different. I wouldn't necessarily do this for servers. This is a workstation policy. but it's really going to be up to you. I On that one, you can go either way, and really what works best for your environment. You're going to know better than us on that one. We do have an option to skip on metered connections. So if you do have a laptop that's running on a cellular connection and you're worried about the data usage of that device, you can say, we're not going to run updates until you're back on a non-metered connection. That is a feature within Windows to be able to identify certain networks as metered versus not. I did see in the chat, uh, I saw some people talking about scripting and being able to run scripts either before or after patching. This is native within Ninja. You can schedule a script to run before you update. Again, like a useful scenario here is that I'm going to go back to the server scenario where you might want to power off or shut down a service. If you have load balance servers, or you might want to shut down a service before you do updates so that the service will fail over to a new server, and then go ahead and do the patching. You could have a postscript where it's set to come back up once, bring that service back up. You can have multiple different postscripts. I've seen people do a lot of different things with these scripts, so it's really up to you and what you found works best for your environment. Back to the best practices, though, I did want to highlight on the reboot prompts. This one is configured if the user is logged in. I want to go ahead and prompt the user until the reboot has been accepted. They're going to prompt every hour. It looks like up to 8 times in this case. Again, it's really up to you and your user base how often. I do recommend giving the user an out, letting them see that prompt multiple times. You don't know if they're going to be in a meeting. You don't know if they're going to be working on something critical. You do want to give them the option to defer for as many times as you feel is necessary. This one is 8. That number is really up to you, but I would encourage you to have something in there. Uh, we can also, if we wanted, we could just notify the user and then just reboot. Don't give them the option to defer. We can go ahead and automatically reboot if we wanted, or do nothing. Again, what was selected here, I recommend something similar to this. We do have the option if the user is not logged in. I recommend rebooting immediately, especially for workstations. For servers, it's really going to be up to you and how your environment is set up. But this is one option. If the user is not logged in and the device is online, go ahead and reboot. There should be no impact to the user in that case. And then Pete talked through the approvals, and this is really where we get into a lot of the secrets of painless patching. The title of this webinar is the more of these that you have set to manual, the more work you're adding for yourself. And so here, like we have reject for security updates. Pete had talked about critical and important, setting those to approve. I from my experience, I actually recommend setting all of these to auto approve. I'll go ahead and do this real quick. Because if it's a security update, no matter the criticality, it's likely going to be important, and you're going to want to install it at some point. So at the very least, I wouldn't just say reject as this one was set to. I would set it to manual just so you can at least see it and be aware. But I recommend for security updates approving them. Um, and then here you can see we have other approvals, whether it's an important update versus an optional update. I know a lot of people in the chat said for drivers and feature updates, they have those set to manual because they don't want to automatically take the Windows 11 upgrade, or they don't want to take the 22H2 update for Windows 10. They want to wait a little bit longer to make sure there's no significant impact to the environment. I would set that to manual just so that you're at least aware that it's available, and then once you see it, you can choose at that time, do I want to reject it for now, or do I want to go ahead and install it? So that is the patch overview for Windows operating system updates. We do have, and Pete talked through this, we do have software updates as well. We have options in here. It's similar options, almost the identical options on Reboot for software. And again, you can come in and say force a reboot after 10 attempts or so. Pete mentioned reboots for third party updates are a lot less frequent. It's fairly rare. There's really only a handful of apps that require a reboot. But we do have the same options on the third party software as we do on the OS. Um, Scan schedule, again, I would recommend daily on this one. I would also recommend, just similar to the OS, the OS updates, I would say run the scan immediately if it's been missed, because you don't know how long that device has been offline. If it's been a week, 2 weeks, a month, you want to make sure that you're at least becoming aware that updates are available. For the update schedule, the OS updates, if you remember, we had those set at weekly. I recommend on third party software to set it at daily, at a time that whatever time you feel is most convenient for you and your user base. Because third party software updates frequently, like we're very used to the Patch Tuesday schedule for Microsoft. The second Tuesday of the month is when Microsoft releases their updates, but we'll frequently see updates for Zoom, for Chrome. If there's a 0 day, you'll see those updates out of band. They'll come when you least expect it. I think I saw right before the end of last year, Zoom released an update in a Friday afternoon that was a critical 0 day update. So that there are I recommend for back to this. I recommend that you do the updates daily for third party software again, because reboots aren't required as often for those. They're pretty rare. Um, and as Pete mentioned, for critical updates, I would almost always, I'm going to go ahead and just select all of these applications that we have. I would almost always recommend coming in here and setting critical patches to auto. Recommended patches, it's up to you. I actually this is set to manual. I lean towards auto, depending on, again, what applications are in use in your environment. The risks of updating those, but for the most part, and even non-critical patches are typically helping with the stability of the software. And then I'll say install application of present, set that to no on here. So now you can see these are all set to auto approve. If you have a specific app that you say, well, I really don't want to take those updates because I've been burned in the past. If I go down and let's say I'll do Zoom as an example, I can go ahead and for Zoom, I can set it to manual, so I'm at least alerted that there's an update available. But maybe don't install it right away. It's really up to you. But back to the painless patching title of this webinar, it's really the more of this that you can automate, the more of this that you can trust that we need to go ahead and approve these. And that's a hard part for me, as when I was managing patching for devices. I think most of us that have done this long enough have been burned at least once by a patch that broke things and caused some type of fire drill for you and your team and your users. But I will say that the impact of having an issue is typically going to be an issue with a patch. Let's say that there was one of the issues that I've had with a Windows patch is where printers didn't work on some devices with a particular Windows update. We ended up having to roll that back. But the printers not working is a much smaller issue than my entire network being compromised because I didn't patch a critical vulnerability. And so when I weigh the risks, I always tend to err on the side of approving patches more often than not. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of this here. And I'm going to go back to my dashboard. And I know we're already running low on time. I don't want to make sure there's time for questions at the end. But here, just at a glance on my overview dashboard, I can, didn't mean to click on that. I can see This icon right here is for the OS updates. This icon below it is for the third-party software updates. I can see that I have 0 failed OS updates, 1 failed for a third-party software. I have pending updates available for the operating system, pending updates available for third-party software as well. Here I can see my devices. I believe somebody was asking in the chat very early on about support for Mac, support for Linux. We are now in beta testing for Mac OS patch support and Linux patch support. So if you have an account with us, or if you're trialing our software, talk with your account rep, talk with your account manager. They can get you access to the betas for those. We plan to go general availability here very soon on each of those. They've been in testing for a while now. But I can go in, I can see on this device, if I go in and pull up, there was pending patches for this one. Yeah, here's the Windows 11 pending patch. There's also one for the malicious software removal toolkit. Uh, I did see in the Q&A, I believe that there was a question around allow or block by KB or by patch ID. So in here, in the pending screen, is where you come to approve a patch. And for Windows patches, you're presented this option. Do I want to approve the patch by the KB number, or do I want to approve it by patch ID number? And I'm assuming that the question that's asked in the Q&A is really more around the which one do I choose. And so I'm going to answer that. And if I'm wrong, let me know in the chat. But the approving by KB, that is useful. So this KB number here, and I can click on it, and it's going to take me outside of Ninja. But I can see it's available for a lot of different operating systems. It's also likely available for a lot of different architectures. This is the 64-bit version of this patch. If I were to approve this by the patch ID, I'm only approving the 64-bit version. Maybe there's an issue with the 32-bit. Maybe I don't want to install it yet for some reason. But when I'm approving by patch ID, I'm only approving this exact patch right here, the x64 version of this patch. If I'm approving by KB, and I can choose to approve this for just one device, or I can do it for every device that's associated with that policy. If I do it for KB, I'm getting that patch approved no matter which architecture it is. If it has this KB number associated with it, it's going to be approved. So it's a little bit more broad to do it by KB. So if you're doing Windows updates, just keep that in mind. One thing that I will call out as well on here, I'm going to go to the installed screen just to have more updates available to show you. We do have, this is another feature that's launching here very soon. We do now show both the CVE information and the CVSS score of the patch. So you can have, when you click on the CV, a lot of these cumulative updates or roll up updates from Microsoft will have multiple CVEs associated with them. You can now dive into those and see exactly what's affected. If it's a higher CVSS score, then you're going to know that you should probably apply that update very very quickly.
Chris, can you
One last
highlight patch rollback here as well?
the patch rollback, yeah, I can do that. So we do have the ability. So a lot of you talked about like you're concerned about trust of the updates. You're less trusting, and so that's why you delay pushing out updates as quickly as possible. If there is an issue, this is another newer feature that we offer: the ability to uninstall an update. And you can do it again. You can do it for if you want to uninstall it. You can choose. Do I also want to reject this patch for now until maybe Microsoft has had a time to push out a newer version of that update if there was a problem, or until we've mitigated that issue in some way. But you do get a warning here saying that there might be unintentional consequences, but we do support uninstalling updates if Microsoft allows it. There are some, this checkbox isn't lit up because uninstall supported is set to no. Microsoft doesn't allow it, so we don't either. That I mentioned that I would show real quick, and I know we're running out of time. I did want to get to the dashboard again. What you're seeing here is a very early preview version of the dashboard. This is more of like an alpha release. What the screenshot that Pete had in his slide deck is the final iteration of that dashboard, but this allows you to see how am I doing across my devices for patch compliance on workstations versus servers, but just overall compliance. The patches that have been installed, which ones do I have pending? I can click in here if I want to see the pending updates. Again, this is an alpha version of the dashboard. When I clicked on that, um, the alpha version only supports Windows. We are adding support for Linux and Mac to this dashboard as well. I can see unapplied patches by age. I could see the workstations with the most unapplied patches. And I can also see servers and workstations with the most failed patches. So if I'm having an issue with a device where it just has maybe all updates are failing for some reason, it'll show up on this list. So we hear you. We want to make sure that you have the information in hand so that you can go fix or work with us to help fix if there is an issue with patching. Not every device is configured differently, and so there's going to be times where patches just fail to apply. So with that, I know we have 3 minutes left. Pete, what
On
questions?
this really quick, just
Yep.
to highlight to everybody, this dashboard is in beta. If you are a current customer, you can email your account manager and they will make Chris turn it on for you, as he's the one who turns it on in the back end. So it is
Yes.
available. It is in beta. We would ask your feedback if you have it, but we are working on an updated version. So go ahead, email your account manager and they can turn it on.
Yep. That's
All
exactly
right.
right.
We've got 1 minute to do a what's next and then questions. Chris, do you have 5 minutes after the hour to answer questions?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
So I would like to invite Christine on. She's one of our marketing coordinators to announce who won our mug.
Thanks so much, Pete. I'll keep it short and sweet so we can get to the questions. I'm here to announce the winner of the Ember mug. So, for those who aren't familiar, it's a self-heating mug for your coffee or for your tea. It'll keep it warm for a long time. So, if you can all pop in the chat and say a huge congratulations to David Baker. Congratulations, David. Be on the lookout for an email from me, and I'll get that out to you. Back to you, Pete.
Congrats, David. Thank you, Christine. Let's jump into what questions we can. We'll stay a couple minutes late and try to answer as many as we can. So, one that I saw really early on was allow or block by KB or patch ID. Can you also briefly show Chris the global patch override, just so we can show that piece as well? I know you already touched on this, but the global patch override would be helpful as well.
Yeah, I can. So I'm going back to administration and under general going into patching. And so there is a global patch override. So if there is a KB, or let's say Windows 11, for example, I believe it has a KB number associated with it. If there's a KB that you know you don't want to install, you can go in and put in that KB number. I'm just going to make something up, type a description so that you know what this is, and I could come in here and say globally reject if I wanted. So if I wanted to block that update for all devices across all policies, I can do that through the global. Likewise, I could approve it as well. So if there's one that I know that I want everybody to have, let's say that it's a 0-day or some type of critical vulnerability or critical patch, I can make sure that that's approved for all of my policies, regardless of how they're configured.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. The next question was about sources from Ben Gagnon. Actually, Ben, I think I have a call with you set up at some point, but I just posted those into the chat. That should cover all of those stats. I believe the three sources I provided. Lahiru asked, how can we find the reason for failed patches?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, uh, this is something that we've added, and I don't know in this environment if I have any failed patch. I don't. Um, we do have under the status, we are now showing the error code that we are getting back, and if we know what that error code means, sometimes it's just as simple as pending reboot required. You have to reboot first before you can install a certain update. we will show that in the status column. If that information still isn't, like, if you're not seeing that for a particular patch, what I would advise is you can look at the Ninja logs. It'll give you a little bit more information, but work with support, or just try locally on one machine. If there's an update that's failing for all of your machines, try to install it with Windows Update and see if you're getting a similar error. But for the most part, you should start seeing, if you're not already, in the status column, you should see the error messages for failed patches, just right under patching and failed. It should be there.
Awesome. The next question here is from Jordan Gutnick. He said, I frequently see Ninja shows a machine is patched, but when I remote into the computer, there are many patches available that have already been approved. Hence the validate and report recommendation. So any thoughts there, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because and I saw other people chiming in on the chat too, whether it's OS updates or third party updates, that sometimes you might get one saying that no updates are available, and you might get another saying that updates are available. If you're seeing that issue, and especially if you're seeing it a lot, I would recommend reaching out to our support team, number one, and figuring out what's going on there. But for us, I mean, the Windows patching and Mac patching and Linux patching, for the OS patching, we are using the OS itself, the engine built into the OS to do those patches. So for Windows patching, we rely on the Windows Update engine, and so there could be an issue with the Windows Update engine on that device if you're not seeing certain updates. Again, we've also seen some devices configured for a WSUS server that doesn't exist anymore. That's a common issue that we see. We're actually putting in, we have a feature now where we will alert on that in the activity log. If we can't find the WSUS server that you've configured, we'll note it in the activity log, and then we'll try to reach out directly to the internet to get updates directly.
One other thing that could be happening is if you have scanned for and identified the patch and it's automatically approved, but the deployment hasn't run, we're not telling you that you're unpatched. We're not telling you your device is unhealthy. Those devices may have patches in pending patches that have to be deployed at your next schedule. So next time that happens, I would check to see if there are any pending patches in Ninja, because they may just be waiting to run on your next schedule.
Yeah. And yeah, that's an absolutely great point, because we will show if the patch is pending, we will show the status of the device is green, that it's healthy, because the patch is queued up, it's ready to go. So yeah, we might show that it's fine. But yeah, if you're seeing where patches just aren't showing up at all, even after you've forced a scan, then let us know. That is something that we are looking at, and it is on the third-party side as well, third-party software. That is a priority for us. A huge priority for us this year is making sure that we're identifying those and getting those addressed very quickly.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. Matt Wilson at the top of the votes here. He's got 20. If you can just give your thoughts here, Chris. What are standard best practices for testing patches, more than just, hey, it didn't immediately crash?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think anyone that's done patching has struggled with this. I would say what I've seen not work and what I've seen work. I worked in an environment. I said we managed 130,000 devices. For servers, we would push out patches 1 month and to test the non-production devices, and then the next month we'd push them out to the production devices. And the hope was that people would be testing in that time span. That never happened, and so we would always go to production, and new things would be found. What I would recommend is I mentioned before when I was walking through the demo, is find a group of people that do use their device pretty heavily, and then create policies where those people get the patches first. Maybe they get them like on Patch Tuesday or Wednesday after Patch Tuesday. Whatever you're comfortable with, they get them right away, and make sure those are the people that are going to give you great feedback, saying, hey, this doesn't work. Is it patch related? Is it not? I don't know. We found the more technical people were great candidates for this because they're not shy of giving their opinions and feedback. And then have another policy where you deploy to the same updates, but you deploy to it's on a different schedule. It comes like a week later or whatever you're comfortable with. Again, maybe your first group goes on Patch Tuesday and your second group goes on Friday. But then let them use their machines. Let them tell you if you're seeing an uptick in tickets or an uptick in people complaining about things not working, then maybe you want to press the pause button on the final rollout to the rest of the organization. But it's really finding a good group of people that are using their device and are willing to be basically early adopters for you. That's what I found has worked best. I don't know if people in the chat feel different, but feel free to add in there if you do.
I do think the primary recommendation in chat was use your least liked client for testing. So we'll go with that one to wrap up the show. So thank you, everyone. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of your questions. I thought we would have a little bit more time for Q&A, but I think we had a lot of really good content here, and hopefully you guys found it helpful. Chris, thank you so much for being our SME on the call here, and thank you everyone for joining us. If you have questions or feedback, please feel free to share it. Would love that intel. And for those of you who are customers, reach out to your account manager to turn on that dashboard. I'm sure Chris is excited to see that utilization go up. So thank you everyone so much for your time, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.